All right, today we're going to dive into my portfolio updates for 2022, what I'm adding, what I'm starting to bring back into the portfolio. We'll dive in a little deep on this one. Hopefully this is going to get you guys in tune where things are going here in 2022. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back to Tech Bath. All right, let's dive into it today. Before we get started, I want to thank our sponsors, and that, of course, is Token Metrics. This is one of those platforms that I use on a day in, day out basis, and really some of the things I use it for are identifying tokens, usually in the early stages. And typically what you'll look at is in this TM grade. When I go into Token Metrics, it's a pretty straightforward. You go to their analytics thing, you go right down into ratings, it'll drop you into this page right here, and you'll get to see their TM grade. Now the TM grade is very similar to what we've done on our own crypto power index, and it gives you a little bit of sentiment. It also blends in some of their research. And what happens here when I'm looking at different projects is that I'll take a look at the grade, then you can kind of see the market cap rank right there. And then at that point, I'll go in and start doing research on the individual projects. So here's Osmosis. This is a good example of one, a project that I'm also buying right now. And this is one of those that I see movement, and this again being almost a 90-point TM grade on Token Metrics. This is one of the ways that it helps me identify early stage projects and or tokens that maybe have slipped under the radar for me. Because typically we don't have a live and active sentiment data analysis all the time. We have to go pull that data individually by projects that we're interested in. So this is kind of my radar system out there. You can go and click the link below if you want to join. It's pretty easy. They have several different programs that you can sign up for, but go to tokenmetrics.com and you'll be able to find all that good information. Let's get into the topic today, and that is, and people are asking me this all the time, what are you adding to your portfolio? What are you looking at in terms of new projects, and maybe are you revisiting some projects? And what I wanted to do today was give you guys kind of an overview of how we start to look at projects when you see a down market like what we're seeing right now. Even though I think the bottom is in, it is one of those scenarios right now with what is happening with Bitcoin. It does have an effect and a residual effect on a lot of these different projects. But as we go through this, you'll start to see what I'm talking about, where some of these projects are maybe at their bottom, and it's a good opportunity for you to either one, increase your position, or two, maybe add a project that you don't have in your portfolio. That's the strategy I'm using. Before we get started, this is a market mover. Market movers are pretty straightforward. We're going to give you some data. We'll also give you some insights and understanding, and then basically kind of what I do around my own portfolios and my own strategy, but not investment advice. It's really designed to give you guys some research and some direction on maybe what to look at on your own portfolios. Let's get into it. I want to talk about Cosmos for a second, because this is a good example, and also use Solana as an example of should you buy these projects when they are pumping. Now Cosmos is a good example. Let me jump to the chart real quick. This is our 1 year chart, and you can kind of see Cosmos had this ATH right here on 9/18 at $44. You saw another big bump right here recently, which was right here early January, just last week at 40, almost hit, was going back up into their all-time high. And then we saw a little bit of a correction in here. So everybody is asking, should you buy this project? Again, Cosmos, very good project. One of those that should be in everyone's portfolio for long-term style holds. The scenario is always going to be, what is the best entry point? So if you look at Cosmos just back here in summer of last year, and its run up right here in August all the way to its all-time high, which happened in September. That is a good example, very similar to what happened to Solana in its run up. Had that nice little peak. This was back also in September. Solana jumped up to 191 right there, and then popped right back down. And then here comes Solana again at $250 right there. So you can kind of see the movement that has been happening with Solana, and now we've got this little bit of correction. Now, in Solana's case, this is one of those projects that if I'm looking at, this is one that I want to go and add a bag on. Now, there are some scenarios with Solana. It's not in the list today of the 11 tokens, but I wanted to kind of give you an update on that. Cosmos, on the other hand, is one of those that I'm waiting for an opportunity. Solana, I'm right at the point of getting an opportunity, but I don't see this being a massive run up, even though we may see some pretty big moves on Solana once we start to see the market correct. Let's get into the list that I'm adding to my bags and or adding this token to my bag for the first time. This is a project, Ultra OS. We've had their founders on the show here before, and this is one that I'm adding to the bag. I had already owned Ultra, and I want to go to the all-time just to give you guys a look at where this potential is right here. Setting it right there at 232 on its potential, and you can kind of see where this thing is trading down here at $1.17. So highly discounted right now for a project that has a potential. And again, the 3-month is on the downtrend. And what I'm going to show you here in a moment on all of these projects is the amplification changes that are happening. So one thing that I do is when I look at, say, token metrics to help identify projects, and then maybe these are already on my list of watch list, I have 2 different metrics that we measure in the Crypto Power Index. One is sentiment, and the other is amplification. Now, amplification, typically you want to see if the amplification is outperforming. Another tool set that I'll use is what is the change in amplification over the last 30 days. So that tells me if there is a movement in a token with amplification, even though it may not be an amplification that is higher than sentiment, which tells me we're tracking upwards. But the fact that it's moving is the key thing, and we'll kind of explain how that works. But with Ultra OS, this is one that I am going to increase my position on. A great project. If you are not on Ultra, just as a quick reminder, just kind of a new, again, another metaverse and gaming play. If you've not checked this one out, this is one I think you should look at. We talked about it before. And I don't want to go into each one of these projects because most of the time we cover these in depth with either interviews or breakdowns. We have a full interview with their founders, so just jump over there and check that one out. This one is another one, and that is Yield Guild Games. Now, this is, you've heard me talk about this before in our Guild Gaming breakdown. We actually did an analysis on all the gaming guilds out, well, not all, but the big ones that we were tracking, and Yield was our number one for that particular video. So check that video out also in below. I want to look at their 1 year, and you can kind of see where this one has kind of been trending. And then if you look at the all-time, again, on this high right here of November at 10 bucks, and we're down here in the $4.30 range where Yield Guilds. Now again, I think that a lot of what we're going to see in the metaverse and kind of the evolution of what's going to happen is going to be big for 2022. So guilds will continue to be a very key component of the gaming ecosystem, and I think Yield is definitely one that you want to probably stay with and very close. This one, I have not added it to my what I call my layer 1 portfolio, which is kind of my risk level just below my major portfolio. I have, and this is probably something you should do, or not financial advice, but in the sense of how I manage my investments and what I'm doing in terms of being able to track where my risk level are and what my risk tolerance is as well. So you have, in my case, a scenario where I track all of the layer 1s, all the major blue chips, and the coins and or projects, even in the metaverse, that I'm just like, hey, this is something that I'm going to put in the bag. It's going to stay there. I might take profits, but most likely it's going to have a bag residual even through a bear market. That's kind of my all crypto is risky, but that's probably my least risk category portfolio. The next layer down is the one I'm talking about today. That's where there is risk, but it's tolerable. And I'll usually throw a few projects in there that might be a little riskier, but it's not like my high risk portfolio where every project in there I know is potentially going to zero. And I'm only looking for a 1 in 10 win. And we do that all the time. So if you haven't checked those videos, check those out. But Guild Games is a good one. Let's go also over here to Spell Token. And Spell Token is, a lot of people look at this one and it's, it's that magic internet money. It's kind of that whole model. But if you look at Spell overall as a project and where it's been going, that's really what I'm interested in. What was its high? And does it have the potential to move? There's some reasons again behind spell that I'll show you in the amplification. But again, this one had this big dip back here in early December, right there on the Bitcoin day that we saw the big correction come. Then it spiked out of that correction. So again, spell was overperforming or over-indexing while Bitcoin was going down. And that's another scenario of why I'm looking at this one right now as a potential to add to it. Now, this would be the first time that I've purchased this project, and I'm going to put it into this level of risk. I feel like this one has a potential to move, and I'm looking at it as well. Joe is the next one, and of course, Joe is trading at $1.51 right now. Again, this is an AVAX. If you've not ecosystem, if you've not looked at what's happening over with Avalanche, you really need to take a look, because Avalanche is absolutely, I think, one of the best layer one projects out there. And we've had, their CEO of Avalabs on our show many times, John Wu, and he's always talking about the innovation and just the evolution of where layer one is going, but also the amount of collaborations that they are doing. And that's going to bring in more and more of these kinds of projects that Joe will be a very key component to. And if you look at where this is going just here in the last month, you can see Joe falling off. So really, have we hit the floor on Joe? I think we're at the bottom right here on Joe. And I think this is one that if you have not had or introduced some risk into your portfolio, like a token like Joe, this is and maybe the perfect time to do it, because I believe we have seen the bottom of where Bitcoin is about to, and we have seen a little bit of correction, and we're going to get into that. We're definitely going to do a Bitcoin video for you guys to give you kind of an update there. The next one is Spintop. Now, Spintop is another project that also has a lot of this kind of scenario of really this high run up. This one, of course, made its all-time high back there in the end of December, just around the corner. And then we saw the fall off, but this, again, I think has been one of those projects that has been somewhat affected by where Bitcoin continues to roll. Now, this is a GameFi ecosystem play, and when you look at just in general, metaverse, GameFi, to a certain extent, many of these are going to be a little bit riskier than your traditional layer ones. These are definitely in my next level down in terms of risk. So, but because of the price at 32 cents, this is one that I think has the potential. And I'm going to show you the amplification on each one of these and why I'm looking at each one. Celsius, you've probably seen Alex Mashinsky on our show before. He's the CEO of Celsius. This one is a little bit kind of a cautionary move for me, because I've had Cell Token before, and there's times where I've owned it early, and this was back here in early 2021. If you look at where this high was right here in June, and then really what we've seen is just a fall off. So the question will be, now that we've got things rolling, and this is one that's on kind of the outer rim. I could drop this out of the portfolio very quickly because it's on the bubble of whether or not I would keep it in this particular portfolio. But what I'm looking at is how stablecoins and regulation are going to be rolled out, and whether or not we continue to see Celsius moving very aggressively in the loan and also in the yield game in terms of paying out these really amazing yields and also providing crypto loans as we see this moving forward. I think in 2022, as we see more regulation, that could open up in a positive light for Celsius, but also there are some things that could roll into some challenges for them. So you got to be very close and watch this one closely. Algorand, now this is a project that's in my portfolio, and though it has had its ups and downs, if you look at where Algorand kind of has had its day, it was back here in September when it hit its 237 high, and it's really kind of struggled to really get a big jump. And that's why I think this one is primed. This is one of those projects, again, that it's pre-AVAX days, it's pre-Solana. If you look at Avalanche, you look at Solana, in that era of when those were much more underrated. I remember when AVAX was $10, Solana was $1.50. These are the kind of projects that eventually, as development starts to roll out, partnerships kind of get going. This has been one that has surprised me. I really felt like this project was going to move more than it did last year, and we've continued to see a downward trend. I do not think this project is going to go back to this basement right here, which was back in July at around 80 cents. This is going to be one that if you can get it anywhere around the $1.20 mark, and this one right now is one that I'm watching very closely to add its position into my portfolio. So Algorand. And if you have not checked Algorand out, we have a whole slew of videos from their founders and their COO, Sean over there, as well as a full analysis of what Algorand does as an ecosystem, kind of just in general, and what they're trying to do. Because remember, their big thing is zero, actually negative zero in terms of their carbon footprint. So they're one of the greenest and cleanest blockchains out there, which is a big achievement as we start to continue to see that kind of pressure on ESG. All right, so let's go to Uniswap. This is one that I've had in the portfolio before and I've dumped it. And there's been reasons for that. And if you look at the chart, you'll know why. You get this massive run up last year. We saw the big pump right before the all-time high of Bitcoin, or I should say all-time high. And we started to see this movement down and never really a good recovery, even though it did attempt it back here in August, and it's continued to price out. At some point, this is one of those projects that, again, Uniswap, just because of its utility, its ability as just an exchange platform, is going to be one that I think will continue to see some movement here. So this is one that I'm just going to expose to a little bit more. I was in and out, and I got it on a falling knife the last time when I sold this project, and that was last summer. So I think this is the next best time to get back in, because we haven't seen these kind of numbers really since, what was that, last July, really was where we've seen this 1460 price, which I think is right there where you need to be on that floor. All right, actually there's a couple more. Audius is one that I've had and sold, and then I'm looking at rebuying this one. Again, got it early. We were talking about it early last year. We got that one pretty much at the high and then popped it out. It rode down to its low price, which was 72 cents. I wish I had bought it back then in June. And then we started to see partnership deals. And again, what Audius is trying to do, and we've got a video on Audius, is they're trying to replace the whole creator system and how creators get paid, especially in the music industry, podcast industry. I think we'll start to see that kind of move. But this one is a good project, and it's also based on Solana, which is another big advantage. So another one that you should take a look at as well. dYdX is a next one. The project is just underpriced right now if you go to where it was and kind of the evolution of what dYdX is trying to do. And if you don't follow dYdX on Twitter, I would jump over and just get in their Twitter feed. They really kind of get into a lot of what's happening in their project on an ongoing basis. It is one that we've covered before on our top 10s, and it continues to be a big performer. Then Altura, it really wraps up the list here. It's the 11th project. It's not in necessarily that order, and then I'll show you the amplification data to kind of represent why I moved on these projects. So this is trading at 11 cents. And again, Altura had this massive run up. Remember, it was the big push. It was a big FOMO jumping in on Altura. It corrected a little bit. It came back on the end right around Thanksgiving, and we saw the 35-cent range, and then it just really fell off with Bitcoin and continues to climb down. This one, I think, is a project that will be around for the long term, and it's one of those that I think, just because of the price position, if you go to that 7-day, it continues to kind of start to balance out right here. So it's got a lot of potential here in terms of how things are going to go with these. And on the buying strategy, I'm going to show you the sentiment and the amplification scores on these particular projects. Now, these are not ranked in 1st through 10 or something like that. This is really just, we ran the numbers on a bunch of projects. Right now, I have about 25 different projects that I'm looking into. One thing I am going to do is I'm going to drop the full list. This is only 11 over on our Diamond Circle. Now, the Diamond Circle, you can go over there and join. It's very simple. Just hit the link below and join that. We drop content on there, and I'm going to drop the remainder of the token analysis, including this right here, the sentiment and amplification scores, over to the Diamond Circle, so you'll get a chance to see all 25. All right, Let's go into what I'm looking at here, because what I look at with sentiment is that sentiment, again, much like the TM grade on token metrics, it has to have a certain level of scores. Typically in the 70s are where I start paying attention. If it's holding a good 70 plus sentiment number over a period of months or weeks, then there's some potential there for that. The next thing I look at is where is amplification. Now, amplification can trail, and in most cases, it does trail. It trails, and that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just simply means amplification is trailing sentiment just by a little bit. If you're trailing too far down, then that's a slower, what I feel like is going to be more flat action in a project. But once you're trailing next to sentiment, or you're starting to flip it, meaning amplification is actually higher than sentiment, then something's getting ready to happen. And we've seen this time in and time out. Now, we don't hit every single one, but the likelihood is there's usually enough, cooler effect out there in terms of how the network effect works in social, how that drives price action, all of that comes into play. The projects that I'm watching very closely right now are these. Yield Guild Games, right there, number 2. You'll notice here amplification flipped on that. Look at Spell, also it's hovering right at top against its sentiment. And then you've got Joe a little bit softer, but it's still hanging in there. And then the next one we get into is dYdX, also hanging right at the top. And then Altura, also flipping right there, 73.08 and 73.16. So when I look at these, all of these are interesting because of the fact that sentiment held and amplification on all of these projects in a time where we're seeing a down market are holding. And as I've always said, that's when you know you have a good project, when amplification and sentiment, sure, you're going to see downward trends, but when it starts to hold or flatten out and stay at a high level, you've got project people that are really all up on that one. So that's kind of the way that I go about it, and it's the way that we take a look at really strategies of going into a lot of these projects. So there's a lot here. I know these 11 hopefully will get you started. And of course, if you want to catch the other 14, just jump over to the Diamond Circle and we'll have another chart like this one where it'll show you the rest of that crew and their sentiment and their amplification scores as related to this. All right, if you guys are listening in over on the podcast, make sure and tune in over here on the YouTube channel. It's really easy. It's also where you're going to get all of this great data, these charts. A lot of the analysis that we do is all done here on the YouTube channel. And of course, it's easy to find. Just search Paul Barron Network. You'll get us there. If you want to hit me up on Twitter, it's @Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.